So, well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Today, I want to talk about what I think is a really important subject, that being how to attract people to our business. I love this word attract, perhaps because here in the UK, the idea of selling isn't something that a lot of people warm to. It's a necessary part of business. However, a lot of people don't like the idea of selling. And some people don't like the idea of being sold to either. They like to feel like they're the one in control making the choice, not being coerced or persuaded, perhaps. So I want to talk about this principle of attraction. We've discussed it a lot, I think, over the years in Niken, but I want to divide the message today into two parts. One, how to be more attractive to our potential people. That's one part. That's the bit that we do. And then the other part is how to attract people to us, in addition to that extra step or focus that we give to striving to be more attractive. Now, I'll use an anecdote, I guess, as I'm inclined to do. As I look back to my dating scene, when I started dating Kim, for those of you that have met Kim and I in person, you will note, and I share this for those that are guests on the call today, I'm not particularly tall. You can't tell that from the video. Maybe I need to go like that so I'm a little taller. I'm not particularly tall, and my wife is. She's a good few inches taller than I am. Now, social convention means that didn't give me a strong start when my interest in her developed, because social convention is that the guy is typically taller than the lady. And I wasn't. Which meant I had to rely on a few other skills or resources in order to find myself more attractive to her. I would tell a few more jokes, try to be a little funnier. I would go out on a limb a little more, in the way that I was perhaps a little more persistent, in a positive way, not in a scary stalkerish kind of way. But eventually, I think good conversation, good humor, and good company defied social convention. Now, I share this because whether we're courting in real life in a relationship context, or whether we're courting in business, I think the governing principles are kind of the same, aren't they? In regards to how we should behave ourselves and how we would encourage others to interact with us. So I want to share a few thoughts, first of all, in ways that we can be a little bit more attractive to others as we start this process. The first step, I'm going to share three of these ideas. The first is, don't be boring. Now that might seem a little bit obvious. You know, we don't want to be boring, do we? But it's very easy if we jump into networking meetings or places where we need to get acquainted with new people, that we can fall into that trap of becoming boring. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is we can end up falling for this, using the same social scripts that everyone uses time and time again, where we ask about the weather, where we ask, what is it you do for work? Where we ask just the kind of the mainstream, uninspiring questions that don't really get us anywhere. Yeah. So we need to think when we're in these situations that we want to be more interesting, we want to be more engaging. And to do that, we need to ask better questions. I'll give you a couple of examples. Rather than asking how's work, maybe we could ask something like, besides work, what gets you up in the morning? Or are you working on any personal passion projects at the moment? I think that's kind of a neat one, because if they're not, it's going to trigger a thought. Gosh, I'm not working on anything that I'm deeply passionate about right now. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that answer? But if we ask those types of questions, I think it's going to make a better difference. So learn to ask questions that are going to require them to ask or think a little deeper. To do this, what I mean is we ask less when and what questions. We ask less when and what questions, and we ask more how and why questions. When we ask a question that starts with how or why, it requires the person that's giving the answer to delve in a little deeper into their own thoughts to give a meaningful answer. So that's one way that we can avoid falling into that trap of becoming traditionally boring in a social setting where we're striving to stand out and make new acquaintances. I'd also encourage us in that process to totally engage with the people that we're with. Put the phone away, use good eye contact, and use attractive nonverbal body language. And when I talk about attractive nonverbal body language, what I mean is be open. If we're closed off like this, that actually tells the other person you're closed off. Yeah, so if we have open hand gestures when we're talking, that's also very positive. A little hint that is also very interesting, if you point your toe in their direction, you're demonstrating that you're more open. Just a little thing. And I'll give you the opposite of that as an example to highlight the point. Have you ever been somewhere at a meeting, at a dinner date or what have you, and you're wanting to go, and what do you tend to do? You tend to go this way, don't you? And start to point your toe towards the door. You start to edge in the opposite direction. And we do that. If we're wanting to walk away, we start to turn in the direction that we're wanting to go. So research has shown that if we actually turn and point towards the person that is speaking to us, it demonstrates that we are far more engaged, we're attentive, and we're interested. So I think that's really important. Here's another little tip, which I found really interesting as I prepared for this call today. If you nod 3 times, yeah, like that. If you nod 3 times, people are inclined to open up and talk up to 3 to 4 times more to you. Isn't that interesting? They're more inclined to open up and talk up to 3 times more because you're nodding and doing that. What's that doing? It's validating what they're saying. You're saying, I hear you, I'm listening, I'm interested. So if you're pointing in their direction with your body, if you're nodding with your head, if you're responding with open hand gestures, you are showing total engagement as you use eye-to-eye contact. You're going to be far more interesting as a result of that, because one of the great ways to be more interesting is to be interested. Yeah. So as we demonstrate that we are interested, we will come across far more interesting as a result. So the other point that I wanted to share was make your first impression count. They reckon that you got less than 30 seconds to make a first impression. Some statistics actually say about 7 to 10 seconds is what we have to make a first impression. And remarkably, those first impressions stick and they last, and they are often very accurate. So what can we do in those first few seconds to make it count? Now, some people think that this may be superficial. I don't. But I think, again, the obvious one is body language. If we have confident posture, I think that goes a long way. If we're standing confidently, if we enter a room confidently. I know when I used to go for job interviews and they would have you'd get in the lobby and they'd say, please take a seat. I would never sit down. I would always stay standing because I didn't want to be sat down and relaxed when the person came in for me to interview. My first impression was as soon as they walked in and saw me, I wanted to be standing, alert, confident, engaged, ready to meet them in the eye, see them face to face on an even plane, and shake hands with them. I didn't want to be sat down, reaching up to shake their hand as a first impression. That to me gave me a disadvantage. So think of body language. I think that's important. How we dress. One of my first lessons that I learned at art school when I was studying graphic design is everything is encoded. The hairstyle we have, the way we do our makeup if we're a lady, the clothes that we wear, the car that we drive, where we live, they're all choices that we've made. They're all deliberate. They all say something about ourselves. It's all part of our personal brand. And I think it's important that we recognize that that personal brand says something before we open our mouths. I've got a friend of mine who's a business consultant who was surprised when he was asked to sit down with someone that he was providing some consultancy for last week in I think it's in Washington. They were in the finance department, and he said they expressed concern when he sat down with this lady. This lady said she expressed concern that people in the office wouldn't take her very seriously. And he said she seemed to have forgotten that she had a nose ring in and she had a tattoo of Homer Simpson in one hand and a tattoo of Bart Simpson on the other. And the reality is, these things speak very loudly. Whether we want them to or not, there are connotations that go with these nonverbal clues. So it's important to pay attention to this when we're wanting to make good impressions. Another thing, and this is maybe something that I pay attention to, I like it, smell nice. Appeal to every sense that you can. And a nice fragrance can make a nice first impression. Don't be afraid to utilize that to your advantage. I think that is something that's really helpful. The last point on being more attractive to other people, to bring them in, to persuade and to help give good first impressions, is this. Know what your hottest trait is. We want to use that to our advantage. Now, what's our hottest trait? Is it our looks? Is it our humor? Is it our smile? Is it our legs? It's certainly not mine. Now, I'm joking, of course. I use that tongue-in-cheek. Research has proven, this is interesting, research has proven that our hottest trait is our availability. Isn't that interesting? Now, what does it mean then when research says our hottest trait is our availability? Well, I'll give you some examples. In dating, as an example, it's about physical availability. Will this person mate with me in a very primal kind of sense, perhaps? In friendships and long-term romantic relationships, it's, will this person open up with me? It's about emotional availability. Yeah. In business, it's about economic and intellectual availability. Will this person work with me? So it's important that we are able to demonstrate that we are willing to be available for that person. Now, available doesn't mean and should never be interpreted as desperate or needy, because I think we'd all agree that desperate and needy are not attractive qualities. Yeah, they don't attract people, they repel people. So we need to make sure we get that fine balance when we're demonstrating that availability, that we're doing that to build relationships, to be emotionally available to people, and to be intellectually and economically available as a coach or as a supporter, as a solution to their challenges or their opportunities. We need to make sure that they see and realize that we are available for them. Sometimes we need to demonstrate that simply by letting people know. And it can be as simple as that sometimes. People may make assumptions. We may make assumptions that they assume that they think that already, that they know that we're available to help. But sometimes we need to actually open our mouth and let them know, I am available to help with this. And letting people know that you're available, using that body language and making good first impressions is a great way that we can be more attractive for other people in our business building activities. Now, I want to move on to ways that we can attract more people as a result into our business. I'm going to share 6 different ways now, and I'll go through them just a couple of minutes on each point. I think they're all very, very important. Some of them you'll have considered already. Some of them you may not have. The first one is I would recommend that in order to attract, because we talk about this law of attraction. I know Mike has talked about it for many, many years. And we all have a strong conviction on that principle of the law of attraction. But there are certain things that we must do to facilitate or to enable that law in order for it to work effectively in our lives. So one of the things that we need to do in order to attract our ideal customers or our ideal business partners is to identify specifically in our own mind, and I would suggest even on paper, what our ideal customer or consultant looks like. Now, there are some businesses out there, and I would encourage you to do the same. When you're developing your own brand, this is what I've done in the past when I've been involved in marketing and branding activities. But when you're establishing your brand, one of the important things that we need to do is define with as much specificity what our customer or business partner looks like. That means some people create an avatar. They give that avatar a name. They may even give it a hair color. They will give it a gender. They will give it an age. They will give it a location where it lives, he or she. But they will get into the details. Who is this person? How old are they? What is their socioeconomic background? Who are their friends? Where do they like to hang out? How do they spend their time? How do they spend their money? What does their home life look like? What are the challenges that they face? What are the opportunities that they're seeking? What are their needs inherently that maybe they are talking about or not talking about? And they start to paint a picture as specifically as possible so that when they do their marketing, when you do your talking, you're talking to that person. Maybe that person has dealt with a particular challenge, or they're striving to overcome a particular obstacle. And maybe your journey resonates with that because that's part of your brand. Yeah. So as you talk about that, you personalize your message in such a way that through the plethora of information that's available online, you learn to stand out above everyone else. Amongst all of the noise of the networking event, for example, your message starts to stand out because you've tailored your message to that person. And I guarantee you that person and a multiplier of them will be sat in that room, will be listening. But you'll speak more personally to them and they'll come up. And I've had this a number of times when I've given presentations myself, and people have come up afterwards and said, oh, I felt like you were talking just to me. You know, did you know that this experience had happened in my life? What you were saying there just resonated with that. And it's like, well, I didn't know about that experience because that was deeply personal for you, but I was speaking to someone like you in mind. And I had prepared that in advance. So we did connect, and people do come up afterwards and they comment and they respond. So it's important that we recognize that we don't want to use broad brush marketing messages in order to attract a targeted market. We need to fine tune what our message is by knowing who they are specifically. The next thing in this regard is to know where our customers and business partners hang out. We want to use the law of attraction. We want to be attractive. We want to have this wonderful magnetic quality. The word attract literally means to draw people towards you, like a magnet. You want to draw people towards you. But if you're too far away from them because you're hanging out in the wrong places, no matter how attractive you are, it's just not going to work. So we need to make sure that as a result of that avatar profiling, we know where they are, where they hang out, so that we can hang out there too. And then, as a result of that, when we have proximity, we have a greater chance for influence and attractiveness. Some places they might hang out could be online forums, could be social media pages or work groups, could be networking groups, it could be school groups for parents. It might be on the school run, for example, where you're meeting, or after school clubs. Could be church groups or special interest clubs. Places where people get together on a regular basis with the common interest. Find out what that interest is, find out how it relates to your avatar, your ideal customer, and get in that place, hang out, join in, engage, and be attractive in that space. The third point I'd suggest is to know your business better. This is really important. It's a responsibility placed on our own shoulders here, firmly and very squarely. If we know our products inside and out, if we know our business inside and out, the benefit of that is we get to be more convincing when we speak to others. When we're filling a need, when we're identifying a solution, we can do that with more conviction because we know our business better. And as I've mentioned in previous webinars, convincing teaching comes from conviction. If you want to have conviction in the heart of your customers, if you want them to be loyal, if you want them to be devoted, if you want to have good business partners that are engaged, their conviction will typically develop as a result of yours, and yours will come from what you already know. So do take time to learn your business and your trade well so that your conviction and your confidence can grow. I think that's really, really important. Step number 4, position yourself as the answer. Now, of course, to have yourself as the answer suggests that there is a question. So what's the question? The question is typically, it revolves around what need do they have that needs to be filled? I would suggest that in most cases, those needs are emotional. Why do I say that? Even if someone's saying, I need an extra 500 or an extra £1,000 or dollars a month, how is that an emotional need? Well, I would suggest that we peel the onion a little bit, pull back the layers. Tony Robbins said that the quality of our lives is proportionate to the quality of our emotions. So the better our emotional state is, our emotional home, the greater our sense of happiness and well-being becomes. Now, what's interesting here is if someone is looking for an extra £1,000 a month or an extra $1,000, $1,500, if they're looking for that, the question we want to ask is why? What need does that fill? What gap does that fill up, make a difference for? It might be that it's offering financial security. Maybe that £1,000 deficit is creating a sense of strain where it's just uncomfortable. They're too close to the breadline. Or it might be that that extra $1,000 results in a nice holiday that they can take their family on, or to provide some means to an end for their children that maybe we haven't taken into consideration. But we want to peel back the layers there and find out what are the needs that they have so that we can fill them. And again, I would always appeal to the emotional need. One, because stories, life revolves around the stories that we tell ourselves. And it's not around the things, the stuff. It's around the stories that we tell ourselves. And so it might be that I'm needing a greater sense of accomplishment, a greater sense of achievement. It might keep the wolves from the door, or it might give my family a nice holiday. Whatever that might be, when we can appeal to that and say, let me help you achieve that goal, it's so much more rewarding and more meaningful than simply hitting a financial target. Yeah. So try to identify and understand what their needs are, and then position yourself as the answer. And you can see how these points all kind of come together, can't you? When we talked earlier on about listening, about using eye-to-eye contact, using open body language and open hand gestures, pointing your body in their direction as you're talking, listening to understand, nodding your head while they're talking, all that kind of stuff. All of that helps them to open up, share their feelings, share their needs, and then you can be in a position then more authentically, more genuinely, more sincerely to provide meaningful answers that will make their lives better. And that's the great thing. This is the objective. And that comes back to this principle of attraction, because our desire is to attract good people where we can help them, where we can improve their lives. And in doing so, we get to, as a side benefit, enrich our own. And that comes as a consequence. But we put that first, and then the consequence follows. And if we want a lot of that consequence, we do a lot of that stuff first. It's as simple as that. But the most rewarding part of this business really is the feel-good factor that comes when you see someone achieve their goals. Now, I can see Louise Coe here on the line. I hope you don't mind me pointing you out, Louise. But Louise went platinum. She's from the south of England. She went platinum last year. And we had a special celebration dinner with her and her team last year, if you recall, Louise. That was perhaps one of my highlights of my field experience. Amongst all the different activities that I've been involved in, was that celebration dinner where we got together as a team, where we celebrated success, where we simply just had a good time. We gave everyone a pat on the back, and it was perhaps one of the best, ironically, business meetings we could ever have had. Yeah, but the feel-good factor that came from that still enriches my business today. So the more we can get involved in helping others achieve their goals and identify ourselves as the answer, it just works. It's a win-win solution all around. And that kind of leads on organically, I guess, to step number 5, which is about building relationships. In order to attract people, it's very important that we build rapport and we build relationships. That's what relationships are kind of built on, is this mutual sense of attraction. Like I said, be it in the friendship capacity with emotional availability, be it in the business sense with economic and intellectual availability, however that may be, that attractiveness and that availability helps to build the relationships. If we're building them online, then one of the ways we can do that is if we have Facebook pages or groups and what have you, then engage with your audience. If you have a post up and someone comments, respond back, acknowledge their comments, engage and create dialogue. One of the purposes of Facebook in a business setting is to help create relationships. That doesn't have to be the warm market. We apply those same techniques in that space. It's really, really important that we engage, we have conversation, and maybe we use that platform for incentivizing and recognizing, rewarding our people that we're connected with on social media to encourage that engagement and that interaction. Having that kind of activity stimulates good rapport and good relationships. Everyone likes to be recognized and celebrated. And if we have incentives for them to participate in some way, they love that too. So the last point, I'd say, and thank you, Louise, for adding the point there. We certainly did have a lot of fun celebrating. I think it's one of the best things that we can do to build relationships is to recognize people's achievements. I've certainly noticed that as my children are getting older now. I've always been encouraging. I strive to be as a father, but my oldest son is not inherently academic, which means when he sat his theory test for his driver's license a couple of months back, he failed it 3 times. And that was really discouraging to him. He did really well in some of his subjects. He failed one subject and he's had to retake it this year. He's got his practical test next week and he's a good driver. But because he's failed a few tests, I've found that his confidence has dropped, even though he's a good driver. And the best way that I can build his confidence is by recognizing his abilities and his achievements and his skills, which means I need to continually look for them, identify it, and acknowledge it with them. So please, let's be liberal when we are praising people around us. Be authentic in that process, but always strive on the side of generosity when it comes to being kind, and when it comes to being nice, and when it comes to paying compliments. Always err on the side of generosity, because I don't think I've ever gone wrong in paying someone a sincere compliment. I think that goes a long way. My last point as we get to the end of the call, I think is perhaps one of the most important, and that is follow-up. And we're talking about attraction here, so how does following up relate to the law of attraction, or being more attractive, or attracting more people? Well, to attract more people, sometimes we need to actually extend the invitation to join us. There is a lot of time spent in building relationships at networking events, online and other places, and yet so many people fail to extend an invitation or fail to make the plan to follow up where someone has done something and we don't follow up to find out what their thoughts and feelings were on it. One of the reasons that this happens a lot, in my observation, is fear. Fear based on the fact that in the follow-up, this is where I get the rejection. Yeah, I can build the relationship, I can be nice, I can be authentic, I can be kind to people, all of that stuff. Really good at that, but invite someone to do something or then follow up and see what they thought of something that means a lot to me. Ugh, that's where I get out of my comfort zone. That's where I get the rejection potentially. Yeah. So and Michelle's just nailed the point that I was going to say in her comments here. Follow up shows you truly care. If we shift our mindset away from thinking about fear of rejection, fear of them coming up with a concern that maybe I don't have an answer for, if we put those feelings to one side and acknowledge the reason I'm following up is because I'm genuinely interested in your opinion. What did you think? What are your thoughts? What is your commitment? I want to know because I want us to move forward together. So I think follow-up plays a very, very important part in completing the process of attraction, because we can attract them, we can be attractive, we can attract them, we can come in, we can build relationships. But to complete that process, we need to follow up by having invitations, by having plans, by having meetings where we have that response and that formal engagement so that relationships turn to partnerships. And we want to make that transition, don't we? Where the relationships start to turn and develop into partnerships. And when we've got that, and we can't get that without follow-up, we can't get that without invitations. Nancy has just shared a really good point as well. our integrity is based on following up, doing what you said you were going to do. And that just adds to the relationship, to the attractiveness of who we are and what we're all about. So I hope this call has been helpful today. We've covered quite a few different points. I think this is a really important subject. Thank you, Connie. I think this is a really, really important subject for us to all consider, that we need to put more effort into being more attractive, recognizing, I love that point, what is our most attractive, hottest trait? It's our availability. Yeah, let people know that we're available. And be willing to defy convention a little bit. Be willing to get outside of the comfort zone of what social norms may expect and go after those people that are metaphorically a little taller. When you do that, you may get some wonderful results that will be a blessing to your business, more than you can possibly imagine. So, been great being with you. Thanks for being with us again, and I will speak to you next week. Take care, everyone.